as general fund.
Always there. Up there. No, I find myself, I do things. Same nature, as it should.
So, that's. Yeah, so, I don't.
I think we're personal.
That was awesome.
Cool. I don't know.
Man, I thought, oh, this is gonna be a quick meeting.
Excited, not excited. How long that day, you know, and when I saw Joel.
So we actually, we have tried to. I was reading it.
I just saw it.
Yeah.
It's easy to do.
I mean, there's a legal component, but we just. Hey.
I saw my dad before. For the first time I was, it's so, and then like, I was feel for that. Like, you know, like, firefighters and like. They're gonna have to get. Weird, I don't know if we like how it's to do that. I said to my dad that way. And ready to spouse. That could turn into a law. Like, what was that? But, we had really good friends. But it's all but it's Spanish, so it's. And I had ideas, but it's long. He's not quite sure. I don't know about street bills, but the way it is that you can just. It's hard to solve. How much there's this. That's. Not very good. That's right.
Yeah. How's Jack?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Bill. This is good. Scooter good? Are we good? Everybody good? Okay, everybody, let's get ready to go again.
Oh, man, 7:30. Feels like 8:30.
It's the work. We're gonna push this to the next.
Right. Good, good, good.
Yeah.
Well, why not? Just in case somebody's here.
We made it.
Okay, folks, we're gonna come back into order.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Here we go.
Rock and roll.
Let's go. Here we go. How's that gap? How's that gap? There we go.
Rarely used.
Bang that gavel.
Okay, we are back in session and we have item 6, the approval of the minutes from October 20th. And we have a new copy of the minutes that was at table, and I think there's some at the door. Any comments or corrections?
Yes, I have one. On the third page regarding council remarks, it says that I stated that the intersection at Gopher Flat and Broad doesn't have yellow indicator striping. The intersection is actually Broad Street and Randall, I believe.
I had that too. Thanks, Julia. Any others? If not, I entertain a motion to approve the new set of minutes.
So move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Next is the consent agenda for the Bryson Park bathroom award of contract. I had a couple of questions. I think we could still approve it on consent, but if you could maybe answer these, Dan. One of them isn't a question, it's a comment. It said to put in the same drinking fountain is over here. And I hope it's slightly modified because the bottom part, the dog water part, doesn't give dogs water. It's a drinking fountain that it shoots, but it doesn't fill the little basin. You can't water your dog
did not know
unless they
that.
can catch water.
So it's a water feature.
It's like a water cannon. Yeah. It's a fountain. And then also on the second page, the approximate cost to date, the 13,000. I'm just wondering, is that engineering costs or did we prep something?
Yeah, engineering costs. Yep.
Engineering costs.
Yep.
Okay. That was all I had. If there's nothing else.
I had one other question. There's a remark with the low bidders construction cost and the base bid and additive all to this would leave approximately 16,925 for construction contingencies and construction inspection and management. Aren't those typically wrapped in a total cost in a bid?
No, it's like
It
our-
isn't usually an 8 to 10% or up to 15% kind of overage.
that'd be the
included?
engineer's estimate, but this is for the contractor's bid, so it's a different part.
Okay. Yes, yep, thank you. Thanks, Dan.
If nobody else has anything, I would move to approve the consent agenda.
A second?
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Just to let everybody know, 9D on the administrative agenda, we're going to push that to our next meeting. So if you're here for that, you'll have to wait a month. That takes us to 9A, the Sutter Creek Police Department Annual Update. Start your timers. We'll see which chief talks the longest.
Dominic wins. Jim, is your mic on?
No.
How
There.
about now?
There you go.
Okay, start the timer now. So, ironically, I did want to start this with a discussion about Dominic and his crew. They are fantastic partners for us. And I know you've heard me say this before, none of us can do any public safety in this county without partnerships. They in our city are great partners for us. I'm happy to have him as a colleague, as a coworker, as a co-chief. They're great to our people. I was very happy to see in his slides, Officer McEwen was in a lot of his pictures. I don't know if Jim wants to be a fireman or what, but our guys spend a lot of time with the firefighters. Dominic allows my police officers that live a great distance from here, not a great distance, but a distance to stay at the fire department, which is another thing that kind of helps keep our staff here because it's difficult. Commuting can be tough, and having the ability for officers to stay there after their shift and go right over there. And Dominic is very hospitable. His staff is very hospitable to us. So I'm sorry he's not here, but I know he knows how I feel about it. I'm thankful, and they're great partners. So it is my honor to talk to you about your police department. I know looking at council, much of what I'm going to say, I bet you there's not a whole lot of surprises because we talk so often about your staff. While I have some of my folks here, I do want to acknowledge them because without them, nothing gets done. I want to start with Sergeant Matt Brewer, and Matt's been here. He's the one employee who's been here longer than me, has moved up through the ranks and handles so much administrative stuff for us. Based upon my schedule, we couldn't function without him taking on that leadership role. So Matt, you know, I appreciate what you do, but thank you very much. Yep. Mark Esty is one of our volunteers. Some of you old school guys might recognize Mark is a former police officer here, and he's been a long time police officer in Amador County, connected to this city, lives in the city, does so much for us. This weekend, Mark was the driving force behind the Amador County Peace Officers Association Award ceremony, in which Daniel Rigo received a fantastic and well-deserved award for being the peace officer here. Mark was behind that, and that's not a small amount of work. To wrangle cops and to wrangle money from cops is not a lot of fun. We're cheap. And then Jim McEwen, everyone knows Jim. Jim was a recipient of that award 2 years ago. So we have a lot of good stuff happening here in our city, and Jim does a lot for us. He manages a lot of programs for us. He is a really good ambassador downtown, talking to people. Everybody knows Jim, and I'm glad he's here. So thank you. So Will and I have this program. Will's going to hit the slides, and I'm going to point at him like that. And every time I hit him like that, he's going to do it. I wanted to use a taser, but cartridges are expensive, and so we're just going to do that. Hit it. Dude. I know.
Anytime now.
Matt, do we have extra cartridges?
His hands are sweating.
There we go. There we go. We're small but mighty, and I'm very, very proud of that. We are what we can afford, and we get a lot done with our staff. So what we're authorized is this. We're authorized 5 full-time police officers. Now you're going too fast, dude. 5 full-time police officers, me, part-time chief, and at present, 0 administrative assistants. At some point, I'm hoping that we can change that. That is a direly needed position, part-time position, quarter position, 3/4 position, to get Sergeant Brewer on the streets. Most of his shift is spent handling all the administrative stuff that happens. You'll see that we have a lot of mandatory reporting that didn't occur, wasn't present when I started. as the chief, and time has changed, and there's a lot more mandatory reporting which takes his time. So that's what we're authorized. There you go. So we're authorized this. What we have is we have myself, we have Matt as the sergeant, 4 police officers were authorized. We have 3 right now and 3 reserve officers, all of whom participate and do stuff. And we've got 6 civilian volunteers. And each person up there represents a lot of work that gets done for us and for the city. There, you got it now. Small and mighty, but we're a 24/7 police department. We do everything that every other police department does. We kind of maximize our relationships with our friends and fellow agencies to get stuff done. But everything that a large police department does, we do, with the exception of custodial issues. Our custodial things go to the county, and Sheriff Redmond and his staff handle people that we arrest that we can't let go on a citation. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to, and you don't have to go back, Will, don't stress out.
I'm-
The 3 reserve officers, I think I know who those folks are. The 6 civilian volunteers, I don't. Is there a chance you could let us know who those folks are so we can make sure when we
Like a
come across
roster?
them,
We
or,
can acknowledge.
you know,
Sure.
we could acknowledge them or thank them, or?
Well, you got one right there. And
I
some-
figured he was a reserve officer.
he
Why?
kind of acts like one.
Yeah.
Because he's bossy like one and tells me what to do a lot, which I actually appreciate.
Yeah.
Yes, I can do that. And I'm, if you see us around during the Parade of Lights, we'll have all of our volunteers here. In a perfect world, I would have liked to have had them all here so you could see them, but people have lives and kids and jobs and so they're doing stuff. But I will make sure and you can see their faces. A couple of them will be pictured, in this presentation, but absolutely. All right. So we really do 24/7 stuff. Again, the only thing we really don't do is custodial stuff. And when we arrest someone that needs to be incarcerated, they go to the county jail and kind of work through the system through there. Other than that, we do everything with our staffing that we have right now. The hours they work. This can be a little bit deceiving because they're supposed to work 80 hours per pay period. It's a good schedule that they've come up with. Whenever we can, we talk with the POA about the schedule that will cover the streets and help them have, a decent home life. So at present, they have every other weekend off, which is, for the most part, the staff enjoys that, so they can have weekends with their family and kind of plan ahead. They work 12-hour shifts. Just a pure reality of working with small staffing. We're down 1 person now. There can be overtime attached to that. We try as best we can to mitigate that with moving folks around when we can. Sergeant Brewer has been eminently flexible helping with that, but there's a lot of overtime that comes with it. They pick 1 year in advance. That's important to me, so they know, come January, they know what they're going to be working, what shift at least they're going to be working throughout the year, so they can make some plans. And just so they don't get kind of stale, they've got to work at least one. We do 3-month rotations, but they've got to do at least 1 3-month rotation on either a day shift or a graveyard, so you're not stuck on graveyard. And the impetus of that comes from when I worked in the Bay Area. Everything was by seniority, and you could be stuck on weekend graveyards for 8 years, and you miss a whole lot of your kids' lives and soccer games and Boy Scout things. So that's why we do that. And I think generally there's no perfect police schedule because people have to be here 24/7. They're here 24/7. So we do the best we can to kind of facilitate their lives. And that's something I think that helps keep your police officers here working for us. Hit it. There you go. Recruitment and retention. That's been an issue since I've been here. It is most certainly not a gripe to any of you. It's a reality in law enforcement. It's definitely a reality here in Amador County. Staff retention is a big issue here. People can go to the Bay Area and make 2, almost 3 times as much money as they make up here. We most recently lost an officer to Sac County. Great kid. I'm happy for him. It was a good move for him personally. He actually showed up this last weekend for Officer Rigo's award ceremony. He still wants to be part of our team, which says a lot about these guys. It's good. So there's been a lot of turnover since I've been your chief. We've lost six folks. It's just a reality. It's, again, not a gripe in any way, but that's a reality that we have to deal with here and other agencies too. Hit it. You're getting good at this now. Okay. Hopefully you'll all remember Philip Wasner and his wife and his little baby. He joined us this year, and getting him on the team was kind of Sergeant Brewer's idea to get reserves that can cover shifts for us, because it's tough. Well, I want these guys to be able to take off, you know, for their kids' birthdays and important events, and having more people to cover shifts does that. So Philip is covering a whole bunch of shifts for us. He's a police officer. He's a tribal police officer in El Dorado County, but when he's not doing that, he's happy to come here and help us and has covered quite a few shifts. We're doing a background investigation on an officer now. Hoping we'll have that done. You know, they're kind of timely getting background investigations because they're thorough and in depth and no fun to be a part of. But I'm thinking by the start of 2026, we'll have her on our streets, assuming everything goes okay. Retention. And the only thing I want to say about this is why they stay here. I think they cite, I've heard this, they tell me about our organizational culture, you know, how we all treat people. That's important. And I think we treat people pretty well. And they talk about stability, organizational stability. We're pretty stable. If you look at the county, there's a lot of transitions and a lot of stuff going on. We're pretty stable here. And something that you all authorized a while ago, and I appreciate it, but I want you to know that's something that keeps these officers here, is having that take-home car, the modified take-home car program that helps keep folks here in our city, in our employ, and it keeps good people here. Get it. Training is important, expensive, and difficult to do. Here are some of the things that we've done this year, and I want to add, it's not even on there right now. Sergeant Brewer is in the FBI Leadership Academy. It's a 1-week academy being put on. So that's not up there. We got him in kind of last minute. So he did that today. He's going to go home, sleep, and then go to the academy tomorrow. So that's another great thing we're doing. Perishable skills are important things we have to do. Peer support is important. Our peer support program is not just for us, for these officers, but it's also for, we work with the other agencies in the county and help support them. We've sent via a grant officers to a international conference. It's in the States, but it's international. Field training officer updates. These are all kind of things we have to do. Management course. Sergeant Brewer also attended that, in crisis intervention. There's some other things we do, but my point with this slide, Council, is that this is an ongoing important thing. We go through an audit every year through post. We have to do this. It costs money. It's not cheap. We try to find, you know, the best and cheapest way to do it, but sometimes it's not possible to get the cheapest or free. So these are things that challenges that I have, is trying to balance the training with our funding and our staffing. But
Hey,
we're getting
Jim?
it done. Sir.
I'm wondering, what is the goal of the 4-week management course, and which officers have the opportunity to attend that?
So that one, that's a good question. That one Sergeant Brewer attended, and that's actually a lieutenant class. That's for people that are lieutenants, which is in theory a higher rank than Matt has within our organization. But I went through it when I was lieutenant in the Bay Area. I recognize the value of it. I also recognize the importance of what Matt does here, which is not sergeant work. He does, you know, definitely lieutenant, captain work, fills in for me wonderfully when I'm gone. So it's really more executive leadership type of stuff. And it's been Matt who's gone to that. And we had to get an exemption to get him into it because typically it's a lieutenant or above.
Exactly.
Okay. Yes.
How much of, I appreciate seeing that you guys are doing all of this. How much of it are you able to work with the other local agencies to schedule and do as a group, or, you know, bring the courses here, or any of that?
Not as much as I would like. And here's why. That's a good question. It all has to be approved by post. So what post is police officer standardized training. And it's a governing board in California that governs what police officers do, the required training they have to have. Everything has to be certified by them. There's not a lot of that up here. And the sheriff has had a couple things. Other than that, Jackson hasn't had any. We've not been able to put it together either. So what that typically, the result of that is we've got to go away. They've got to go away to training. We've got officers going down to different places for training because, you know, we can't have it up here. So it's something that's got to be certified, verifiable, done by trained trainers, and
Right.
there's a lot of rules behind it, but that's what we,
Maybe it's
deal with.
one thing that, you know, as all small cities and counties are facing the same, you know, cost situations that we are, those things would pool together, you know, even South Counties, Angels Camp and El
Sure.
Dorado and everything. It would seem like everybody could.
yeah, it's just someone's got to take the initiative, not initiative, but have the time to go, and you have to write a lesson plan. You have to have it approved by post. Then there's funding associated with it. I haven't done that because there's a lot of challenges, and I'm trying to just keep guys on the streets and doing what we're doing. But I do not disagree in the slightest with you. And that's always been kind of a difficult thing for us to overcome, but we have to, if we didn't get audited every year, you know, we might do it differently, but it's important stuff. Get it, buddy. Important partnerships. I don't know, I couldn't say that. So I want to point to my good friend Mark Esty over here. I sent this to our staff and said, look it over, see if I made any mistakes, if I missed anybody. And he's like, Jim, you don't have the DA's office on there. And by golly, I don't. So I want to, even before, you know, I read down this list of folks, they're a tremendous partner for us. They are an ally. They help me making decisions on things. They're great partners. In everyone else there, you'll kind of see there's really no surprises there. Who's important to us. Really, any group is important. I didn't have animal control up there, and I just missed not putting them up there. I think everyone knows my grievance with animal control in terms of how I feel they double charge our residents, but they're good partners. They're good humans. They do good things for our animals, and I appreciate them. So they should be up there also.
Would you consider, I'm sure you consider them a colleague, but is behavioral health, Nexus, CPS, all those folks, are those people that you work with regularly?
We do work with them on a regular basis. I mean, these are kind of the ones we deal with a lot, but absolutely, we deal with all of those groups a lot. Mental health we deal with, definitely CPS. My officers interact with them more than they should. So we have a lot of partners. So that's why I wanted to point out the ones that I missed. Very important ones. So there are other ones that I missed. I just wanted to give you a snapshot because I want Dominic to win the award for who spoke the longest. So yeah, I know. See, you are a fire plant. But we have tons of partners, and if I were to look over here at my guys, they'd probably tell me 4 or 5 others that are important that I left off. So if whatever I left off, know that we work with anybody to make our city safer. Absolutely anybody. Hit it. Here's another thing we talked a little bit about, reporting requirements. And this is a time eater for the officers, and it's a time eater for Sergeant Brewer. But it's important. You know, we want to note who we stop. So we want to be transparent about the people we stop and what they look like and their gender and all that, so people know what we're doing. I think I mentioned this last time I talked about this slide. Our officers do a great job, and this is always reinforcement to me that they do really good things. They do the right things in the middle of the night, and the stats prove that. Hit it. So what's interesting about this, the perceived race, what happens is the officers have got to enter data, and that's what their perception. So these police officers, they make a car stop at 3 a.m. They fill out data, what their perception of the race of the person is. And what's interesting about this is that generally, you know, with some diversity there, it goes down the lines of our citizenry here, not only in the city, but in the county. It's pretty consistent. So, we don't have, one group that doesn't live here getting stopped, a lot in our city. That number with the percentages of what our officers identified is consistent with the people that live in our community. And that, to me, that's reinforcement that they're stopping people in our community, and it's in line with who lives here. Hit it.
Would it be fair to say, though, that you just mentioned this making a night stop, that your officer has no idea at that point what his perceived of what race or they might be doesn't occur until after he's interacted with, after the stop occurs? correct?
That's in this, the RIPA data, stop data happens afterwards.
Right.
So if you look, you're have you ever driven in a car and the cops are behind you? It probably hasn't happened to anyone here, but you get pulled over. That officer at night, they have no idea if there's one person, four people, if they're white, black, purple, polka dot, they have no idea.
Yeah.
That information is determined afterwards, and they make their best judgment.
Just a point that I think is important.
No, thank you. Perceived gender, I mean, mostly it's males that get stopped. And again, fairly consistent with our county. Hit it. How do they end? Most of our stops end with warnings. A large majority of them end with warnings. Some issued citations, some are arrested. And that's typically how our stops go. I've mentioned this before to council, but I'm happy to mention it again. It's important to me that they make stops. It's the stops, not the tickets, that typically change driving behavior. So they have discretion to write citations. At 3 a.m, I'm sleeping, and I'm not going to make a decision for them as to who they cite and who they don't. They make good decisions on that. And officer discretion in a small town like this, when they're the only man or woman patrolling, I trust their discretion. So it's a high number of warnings, but I support their ability to make that decision in the moment and not call me and go, hey, Jim, what should I do? They've got this under control. And it's the stops that make a difference in terms of traffic collisions. And we'll get to that. We've got a small number of traffic collisions in this town, and that's because these guys make a lot of car stops. And when you see someone getting pulled over, you don't know what's going to happen to them. You don't know if they got pulled over for a taillight, or if they got pulled over for speeding or running a stop sign or driving badly and go for flat. All they know is someone got pulled over, and that impacts their driving behavior.
Jim, this one slide and those percentages, as you know, that I get a little bit of heartburn about that because
Understood.
the citation infraction percentage rate is so low. And I was trying to see if I could find any other information from small towns, and I wasn't able to find any in terms of, well, what's their percentage? I mean, CHP percentage for every stop, it's 75% they get a ticket.
Correct.
In Los Angeles City, it's 50%. I know that's not us, but we're so far below that. I'm not sure how the rest of the council feels about any of that, but I just wanted to weigh in and say that does concern me, and I'd like to see that go up. And I think that more ticket writing would go a long way in this town for a lot of traffic violations, people parked in reds, all that kind of stuff that you and I have talked about
Yes, sir.
before. So I just wanted to go on record and bring that up again.
I understand. I hear you. You have no quarrel for me on that. But again, I wanted to say this, that I have to trust their discretion at 3 a.m.
Right. No, I appreciate that, but I guess I wanted the officers to hear that also.
But-
I'm not sure. It's like there's a mindset, and you lead from the top, and yes, I believe that warnings have some impact. I haven't seen any evidence that a warning is as impactful as a ticket. That certainly hasn't been the case in my life. I get a ticket and I pay attention.
Mhm.
I get a warning and I thank God, and then, I forget about it 2 weeks later. But anyway, we don't have to debate that here now, but I just wanted to weigh in as a council member that concerns me, that low rate of citation.
So, sir, I appreciate that. I know you and I have had that discussion before. I'm happy to entertain everybody and listen. I serve at your pleasure and at Tom's pleasure, and all I can do is tell you my truth.
Yep.
Um,
Fair enough.
which is backed up, by stats. It does impact, seeing someone get pulled over impacts driving patterns. So we have discussions about, we'll kind of divert and talk about Gopher Flat because it's always an issue. And I was happy to be here in September or whenever that last meeting when Justin was here, and I was happy to be able to address him. And I take that information back and I tell them,
Right.
and I tell them, pay attention to it, spend time out there. I don't want to tell them, you better write tickets. I tell them to take the appropriate action. And
Right.
in this case, I think they made 16 stops and wrote 5 citations. I'm happy with that.
Right.
I hear you. I understand that. But everything's balanced and there's a lot of nuance
Right.
in policing a small town.
Right.
And,
Oh, go ahead. Tim.
no, I'm done, Joe.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I say I share a very similar sentiment as Dan. And going through the statistics pages that you provided, which is a boatload of information and comparing Cedar Creek with other communities. But the one comparison I would like to see that isn't is that percentage of citation per stops. And also with the consideration of, I'm not saying you have to be self-funded, but I believe that when there are the citations, I share exactly. If it's going to come out of my pocketbook, I'm not going there. If it says, yeah.
I
that.
understand that.
I will learn more by something when I have to pay for something than I'm a hand slapped. And, but moving on. But I would like to see a comparison of our 4%, what was it? 4% citations to the number of stops, how that compares with the cities that you used for the other comparisons and how we stack up.
So if council directs me to do that, I can find it. It might be a little bit laborious to do it because we're going to have to call all those agencies here, and I'll do it if I'm directed to. But here we have the benefit of a records management system that the sergeant and the officers can query very quickly and come up with these stats. So if that's important to you, I'll get it. Just know it's not going to be like that, like I can get those stats today
Yeah.
for us. But
And again, I'm not saying you have to be self-funded, but I do believe that the citations also might offset, if you need something else, special for the department, that, it's not that we can depend on the fund because obviously it's static.
sure.
I mean, but
So
y-
thank
I'm
you.
just looking for, I think, stronger enforcement.
I understand and you're heard. I do want to say this so it's on record. First, we get nickels for every citation we write. So we're not going to fund, any part of the police department with our portion of what we get for a stop sign citation. Second, I don't want to be on record saying we're going to write more tickets because we've got to self-fund.
No,
I will
that's
never do
why
that. So
I want
and
to
I'd be
say I'm
against
not
that.
going down that road.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair enough.
I agree.
And just, I hear everybody. I understand. Like I said, it's nuanced how to lead and enforce laws in small cities.
Right.
And that has been my perspective on it, is that if I can leave you with anything on that one topic before we move on, discretion. I leave these guys with discretion, and they get things done and they show up and they're here 24/7. They're here on Christmas. They give a lot more than they get. I hear you. And we have this discussion all the time. No one over there is surprised about me talking about citations. They know it, but I'm not going to dictate, write a ticket.
Right.
That's just bad leadership. And I'm trying not to do that at my age.
No,
No, and I don't
appreciate-
think that we would have you take that approach.
I understand.
But with the understanding that enforcement comes at many levels, enforcement comes at a warning, enforcement comes at a citation, that my personal feeling is I would like to see enforcement rise up a little bit to the citation level.
Fair enough. And I hear you, and you have no argument for me.
How that's done then obviously is up to the chief.
It's nuanced, and just so you know, everything you say, I take it in. But I want to make sure that I project it to your police officers in a way that makes them want to stay here.
Absolutely.
That number of 87% warnings, that does not equate to doing nothing. These guys work, I worked in a big city with a lot of stuff going on. These guys work way harder than big city cops.
Right.
Um,
So I don't think, certainly we're not indicating that the 87% means that nobody's doing anything. I mean, we understand that.
Yeah.
I think one of the other issues, Jim, is that, and it's coming up now because we've been talking about the new striping plan to make sure that the red zones are striped appropriately red and that the yellows are, yeah, and then we talked about, but all of that is for naught if there's no enforcement or if the enforcement isn't consistent, because then we start getting complaints about people
mhm.
who get ticketed recently or saying, what about the other 150 cars that have been parked out there for the last year?
You're entirely right.
So these are issues, we're not going to solve it tonight, but I think we need to go down this road and come to an agreement on how we're going to do those specific types of things. Traffic stops is one thing, parking is something else, and maybe we can talk about it at that level of specificity when
Absolutely.
we continue our conversations.
So you bring up a good point, and I talk with my officers and myself about parking enforcement all the time. And this is a good time to tell you what they do. You know, I tell them to go to Gopher Flat. I direct them to go to the schools every day. I direct them to walk downtown. They have to check all these other businesses. So these men and women, they're men right now, but we'll have a woman here shortly. They're like a rubber band, right? And I can pull it so far and then it's going to snap. So that's important. The parking is important. The citations are important. But it's also important, and this is where you can evaluate me as your chief. I think it's important for these officers to walk downtown. I think it's important for them to be valuable present in the school, to be responsive to people. I can only stretch them so far. And I would put that back most respectfully on council. I mentioned before the need for administrative help. If we add, you know, you have to write a parking ticket every day, well, that's just one more minute. They're not actually patrolling and doing, you know, the law enforcement job they do. So it's important. We wrote a bunch of parking tickets. I wrote some myself last week because what we talked about is important to me. But I can only stretch that rubber band so far. And it comes down to staffing and it comes down to prioritizing what we do. And I try to do the best I can to prioritize their workload and their direction. But you're all heard, and everything you say, I'm taking in.
Fair enough.
And I'll do better.
Fair enough.
I will do better.
I understand that there's nuance, but 4%, 87%, that's not a nuance thing. And it's not all 3 o'clock in the morning. And I absolutely accept that warnings affect behavior. I would suspect that tickets affect behavior a little bit more. I think, especially when we're talking about places like Gopher Flat or Sutter Hill Road or Randolph Street last year when school started, where we know we have big issues. You know, I think that it is more effective. And I think that you think that too, because when Justin spoke here earlier, you popped right up to let him know. And I was very glad that you did so, that
Thank you.
as a response, we wrote some tickets, you know, so I think we're all on the same page. I don't think anything needs to shift overnight or reverse the numbers, but I just, you know, wanted to go on record as well, I think, but
That's fair. And Mayor, I hear you. I hear everybody. I'm a sponge. I'm taking it all in and I'm not arguing. Please don't take my responses as argumentative. I'm taking it all in and I own it.
I hear what you're saying about the rubber band, and you're absolutely right. In your department, all of these guys are fine people doing their job as much as anybody possibly could. You guys are incredibly stretched. I think that it's probably beneficial for us all to communicate more on what the priorities are. You know, I don't think that we necessarily understand what patrol is. And if patrol is walking up and down downtown versus, you know, sitting on Gopher Flat, our job is not to manage you, but maybe that
Sure.
is the way we can communicate more, is to make sure that we are seeing priorities the same way.
That's fair. And it's a good time for me to remind everybody, each of you has an open invitation to get in a patrol car anytime you want, because that will change how you see things. about what these guys do. You're welcome to do it. And I, I would welcome that because you're going to get to know them a little bit better. You're going to get to know what they do and how difficult it can be at times to do it. I mean, we're all honored to be your police department, but sometimes it's difficult. If someone's, they arrest somebody and they've got to go to the hospital to get cleared, well, the officer's at the hospital for 3 hours. Can't write tickets for 3 hours. So those are the nuances that I think are important for you to see. And it'd be great if someone rode and ended up spending 3 hours in the emergency room with a crazy drunk person to maybe understand when they're there, they can't go anywhere else. The officers are stuck there.
You're absolutely right. But if the people are already pulled over, right, the 87%, then the officers aren't at the hospital doing that. I guess that's the variability that I'm concerned about. The percentage of tickets for people that we have gone through the trouble and taken the time to stop.
That have already been stopped.
But thank you all. And just know this, I'm happy to continue this conversation. I own it. I'll do better. Okay. So if we didn't talk about it, we give 87% warnings and 4% citations. I'm joking. Hit it.
That's good.
There's a lot of activities. Again, there's a lot more stuff that we do than that. These officers make a lot of stops. We just talked about that. There are the citations. Generally pretty low collision factor here in town. And that's where, I might push back a little bit that those traffic stops make a difference in terms of collisions. We don't have a whole lot of collisions. You see the rest there. What I'm very proud about is the use of force in that 0. That doesn't mean that they have not all been in difficult situations. I think everyone except the sergeant have been hurt this year, either assaulted or something bad happened to them in the line of duty.
Can you talk
they've-
about what use of force means?
Use of force use of force can start out with verbal commands. Put your hands behind your back. It can go all the way up to control holds. It can be tasering. It can be, the worst case is striking folks in events where you've got to use deadly force. Our officers managed all these events with no use of force beyond having to just tell someone to comply. So they're pretty good about that. And that's one thing our officers and all officers in this county really excel at, is because cover officers are so tough to come by. I mean, these officers ride by themselves. That's what they do. They're on their own every time, every day, with the exception of when the sergeant's on duty or when I'm here. They're the Lone Ranger. So they've got to get really good about how to kind of talk someone into handcuffs, talk them into complying with them. It's a skill, and they definitely have it. Another thing, as your chief, I'm really happy to see that big fat 0 at the bottom, citizen complaints. And that's a formal complaint where someone fills out a form and we've got to investigate it. We have people that call and are unhappy about things and they haven't gotten their report in time, or they weren't happy with maybe how an officer did something. We can manage those. But people that were so aggrieved, they filled out a complaint form, didn't have any. And that is a chief, someone that wants to manage your risk, that makes me pretty happy.
Yeah.
So,
Looking at these statistics, going back to percentage of citations and warnings, the ratio, makes me ask, if we're going to write more citations, what are we addressing a particular issue that we need to address? Do we need to write more citations because of non-compliance with our traffic laws, or
I think
repeat offenders?
consistency and
Being on Gopher Flat is the perfect example, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
We,
okay.
a couple years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I don't remember what it was. You had, because we don't have enough staff, you came up with a great idea, and we had volunteers, I believe, in cars. So it looked like people could get tickets, and you did a bit of a study. Didn't you do a speed study there, right?
That-
So This is a small town and word travels fast and I can't wait for it to get out that 4 people got tickets on Gopher Flat Road.
Five.
Five. Yeah, you know,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that from my perspective, that would be. the-
Right. And I can see that as in a targeted situation like that, sort of a zero tolerance, attack on a particular area. So I just want to throw that out to kind of consider overall what you're doing and what you're doing in a specific area. That's all.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We will.
Bill, yeah.
Okay.
What is a business check? I read that every month and I don't know what it is.
Walking into businesses, rattling doors, our graveyard officers, like Jim works graveyard tonight.
Open businesses or closed businesses? or
Both,
Both.
both.
Okay.
So
Just
we,
curious.
no, that's a great question. So like tonight, Jim will walk downtown and he rattles doors and we call businesses, hey, your door is unlocked, or hey, someone broke your window. And during the day, it's typically going into businesses, checking on them. Just because for me, it's important to have that visibility and to have that visibility that's not just a cop car driving by. Again, it's part of how I envision policing a small town, of course, taking leadership from you, but that's what we do. And that's a number that I like a lot, because they're rattling door, and they call businesses all the time. People leave their front door, back door unlocked. Things are askew, and we point it out. And that gives, I think, it gives our citizens a level of comfort knowing that, we can provide that kind of service. We're not just kind of driving through at 100 miles an hour, going to another call, 15 miles away somewhere else. That's the small town policing that I enjoy giving to the city. Hit it. Response times. We have, exceptional response times to these calls, and we could pull up a bunch of other ones that we have. And I put the comparison to the sheriff's department in there just, because they're the largest organization in the county. We help them quite a bit. We get to calls pretty darn fast. Sometimes those numbers, I think we were talking about that amongst our police department. Some of those numbers are off a little bit because if we're in Jackson helping Jackson, because we help them a lot and they help us, it might add a little bit of time. But typically when a call comes out in town and the officer's otherwise unencumbered by something elsewhere, they're there super quick. And we have great relationships with the other agencies in the county. We help them, they help us. There's no way to do law enforcement in Amador County without that.
If I can, I'm going to bring this up. I didn't know if it was an appropriate time. The event that happened Saturday, we had, I don't know how many were where, we had over 100, somewhere between 100 and 150 Harley motorcycles that literally came in and took over the town, parking in red striped areas, parking, taking up half of Eureka, revving their motors up and down. It lasted probably for a good, for when I was there, for at least 45 minutes, so somewhat sooner. My question is, and in contacting you at that time, we only had one officer, and understand, because we're stretched thin, usually on a Saturday, pretty nice day. When an unexpected event like that happens, when enforcement backup might be necessary, like not just 1 or 2 from Jackson or 1 or 2 from my own. Who do we rely on for some type of event disturbance like that? Because it could have gone south.
It could have, and I will, it's a great example, and you and I lived it, so we have probably a greater understanding of it. But we talked about the officer's ability to calm people down and to manage upset people. So this officer managed, by himself, a Lone Ranger, got these people calm. They became compliant to him. So if we had someone that was screaming and yelling at him, we might need a whole lot of backup. To answer your question, though, we rely typically on Jackson's our first line of defense. They're so close. We really work hand in hand with them. We work hand in hand with the sheriff's department. Ione's a bit out there, but we definitely help them and they've helped us. I think it's more us helping them than the other way around, but we all help each other. So had that turned into a fight, you know, we would have called everybody we could, and CHP is there also to help. But to answer
Okay.
you specifically, Jackson's are typically our first line of defense for mutual aid. And we do stuff for them, you know, every day. They do stuff for us every day. It's
Do we rely or access resource, the sheriff's department at all, or primarily the municipal?
they help. Here's the issue. They always help, and they're each one of those deputies and the sheriff on down, great men and women. The reason we typically go with Jackson, it's proximity, right? We're right there. And because when you have so many calls for service where you're working with someone, you build relationships and you listen on the radio and you look in CAD, the computer aided dispatch, you can tell what's going on. Hey, do you need help with that? So it just kind of, it builds. So we get help from the sheriff. No one ever has told us no for help, and we've never said no to anybody. And that's our rule. You know, they don't need to call me to say we're going to go help someone in, you know, wherever it is. They have that discretion because we want to make sure people stay safe. And we've gone El Dorado County, you know, we've gone all over helping, and people come here too.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we have that coverage.
We do.
Yeah, okay,
Um,
thank you.
I have a question along that lines as well. How many people did the sheriffs have on shift at a time?
It depends, but I think right now they might have four. And that's for the whole county. So you're going, you know, up to Kirkwood, their responsibilities are vast. So they're helpful. They're fantastic peace officers. But for us, it's just closer to have typically Jackson.
And then I'm sorry to have to ask this, but do we have a plan if there's, like, God forbid, there were to be a school shooting and like how heavily armed are you guys on a given day? And if the sheriff had to be called in for that kind of thing?
So that's a great question. Active shooters, the training and the response philosophy is simple. So here in town, and my officers know, we've talked about it, they have appropriate weapons. I don't know that this is the forum to talk about the weaponry they have, but they're adequately armed to deal with something like that. Their job is to go and find the threat and stop it. So they go and stop it. We don't wait for other people to come help us. We kick in doors, we break windows, we go find the threat and we stop it. And there's not a man on our team that doesn't know that and hasn't thought that through. In terms of weaponry, you shouldn't just trust me, but trust me, they have the appropriate weaponry to deal with it. And then beyond that, if it turned into kind of a standoff type thing, that's where the sheriff's department comes in. I'm always more concerned about what happens in that first 5 minutes. In the first 5 minutes, it's them dudes that are going to go with the appropriate weapons and a lion's heart and fix it.
Thank you.
Yes. Will, wake up, get it. Part one, crimes. These are kind of throughout, these are FBI stats. Those are, I mean, I'd like it to be big fat zeros all the way down, but those are kind of our major crimes that have occurred. Doesn't count, you know, thefts and other little minor thefts that have occurred, but those are the major ones that have happened in our town. I'd prefer it be all zeros, but the reality is it's, you know, people are people, and those are, I'd like them all to be better. So I won't be happy until they're all zeros, but they do fairly well. Yes, Mayor.
Domestic disputes under aggravated assaults there?
It depends on the severity of it. A typical domestic violence would not fall under a part one.
A lot of our domestic violence calls aren't on that.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. Hit it. A lot of good stuff going on. I know we talked about things that I can do to improve. A lot of good things are happening here. And this last weekend, Daniel Rigo, who's actually there getting the Mad Mothers Against Drunk Drivers Award, was the Amador County Peace Officer of the Year. super well deserved. He is a fantastic police officer who does so much for our city. He's part of a team. He doesn't work alone. No one here works on their own. We do a lot of good stuff together, and there's a lot more that could go up there, but things that I wanted to bring up that you might know about, you might not know about, is the Shop with a Cop thing that we do every year. Brings us together with kids that might need a boost, a hand up. We like doing that too. It makes us feel good, doing that, being able to help. Business liaison is really what we talked about, going into businesses during the day and talking to folks and being accessible and helping plan events and giving advice and getting to know the owners. Parade, and it really should be more event management, but I think we have a strong integral part of how these parades happen here in town, how we plan them. And just know, I mean, they look great walking down the street and everything's great, but please know, from me on down to these guys, we think about safety. We think about, what do we do if something goes bad? Every briefing we have, we talk about how we're going to manage it if someone drives through, if someone comes out and, I won't even say it, but does something stupid, how we address it. So just know, as beautiful as those parades and events look, we're thinking and we're planning each one of those. And Tom allows me to have input on the permits, and I'm not a quick signature because I want to make sure we do it right. It's worth that discretionary time. So that's important to me. Wellness grant. We got a grant from the state, and it's running out here in a couple months, but we built a gym that you are all welcome to use right downstairs here, because fitness and wellness is important for everybody. They put together, the officers did it. I asked them what they wanted to do with those funds, because it's outside of the general fund. It's not an enterprise fund. It's something has to be used for wellness. And they put together this gymnasium, and it really is, it's something to see. And I'd like you all to use it if you want. So
What
those-
happens when the grant runs out, chief?
So then it runs out. So I have to, you have to, so we have, I mean, the state, and God bless them, I'm thankful for everything we get because it's tough to get grants here. When it runs out, if I don't spend it, we give it back. So we're going to spend it. So that's what happens. It's
So you
just-
don't lose your gym.
it's like a 2-year grant, and we have to use it within, I think, by the end of the year. And if whatever I have left over has to go back.
You got room for an indoor pool?
We have room
Just
for a lot of stuff.
thinking.
Yeah.
Big.
So, and that doesn't cover all the good stuff these guys and guys do. They're out there and they care about the city, more than I can certainly relate to you. Hit it. Organizational needs. I understand the finances of it. I never grieve our budget. I understand, how budgets work. I work within my budget every year. But what we need to be better is, 1 or 2 more police officers. We need administrative support desperately. That's something, and I know everything costs money, and I have no guilt trip for anybody because we talk about money all the time. It's something that, at some point Measure P could be used for that once the roads are under control. We have mechanisms, we have funding options, but that's something we need. Another thing that was really brought to light this year is Sergeant Brewer has been talking to a bunch of vendors on this. We need a robust, integrated city camera system. He is so on top of this. He's doing a great job. We learned a lot looking at the video system for the schools, your school. It's phenomenal. So it comes down to money. Matt has some quotes for us. My plan is to very shortly, next couple of weeks, give it to the city manager, and he'll make decisions as to how he wants to present it to you. But that's a need. That's just not for my organization. That's for our city. That's for our city. Say, yes, ma'am.
I'm making an assumption, but eventually, another police officer would be great, but the camera system in the short term would cost less and help alleviate some of those issues, right? Not that all the goals
Well-
don't stay up there,
So
but a camera system, I'm assuming, is less than another officer?
it's definitely less than another officer. But camera systems can't go to someone's house and knock on a door and put cuffs on someone. No, it's important. And Mayor, I did not put those in order. They're all important to me. You know, it comes down to how you prioritize. I know how our finances work. You have no grievance from me on our funding. But if I don't tell you what we need, you can't consider it. So, they're great systems. Sergeant Brewer's been working his tail off, getting 2 really good quotes for us that I'll present to Tom, and Tom can do with it. You know, I assume he'll present it to you at some point, after he reviews it.
I can ask Brewer, but,
You have to ask me.
no, does Jackson, Ione, anybody else have these? And the reason I'm asking is, you know, I'm always throwing out working together. I wonder if it was something, you know, if it's a system, if everybody bought the same one and, you know, entered some sort of contract together, if that would help with costs in some way. You know, or at least it's worth the question if those guys are looking at one.
That's one of the things I did bring up, the companies that I'm talking to, and they're open to considering some kind of discount. There's just not like a discount wiggle room with these.
Sure, if it wasn't a discount on the actual equipment, however you monitor it, store it, you know, like we were talking last meeting about the other cameras that the
Flock,
On the highway.
Flock. And that's one of the
Yeah.
ones that Matt's talking about, is the
right.
benefit of
So
having
if
those.
everybody does this together, it would seem economies of scale wise to make more sense.
So we could definitely go down a rabbit hole with that, but Flock, in short, Matt has looked into cost effective. We've worked together long enough. He knows the first thing I'm going to ask is, what does it cost? So our ability to buy a couple cameras, which gets us access to everybody else's cameras. But in the end, you have to have cameras in your own city, and you can maybe share the data, but you can't share the cameras. The cameras have to be on, you know, Main Street or wherever we're going to need them. And that's going to be incumbent upon us to fund. But in terms of shared data, that's definitely an option. And Matt, again, is on that. Yeah. It is our pleasure. We're holding pennies. And I haven't beat Dominic yet on time, but it's only because you guys had a lot of questions. So I'm blaming you. So those are some of our needs. You know, again, that's all tempered with, I understand what our dollars mean and how limited they are. Hit it. The future. We really value our relationships here in town. And we want to keep those going. I think that's what makes us unique and what helps our city. I want to enhance their training. I need more funds for that. We're doing the best we can with what we have. I want to continue to focus on officer health and wellness. Working in Sutter Creek is just as stressful as working in Oakland or somewhere else, because when you knock on a door, you don't know what's behind that door. And like I said, this year, everyone except for Sergeant Brewer has been hurt, and Sergeant Brewer was hurt a couple of years before that. So these guys, they're getting hurt doing our job. So I want to make sure they're well, they're healthy, they're fit, and they're able to take care of themselves. What I'd like to do, and what we want to do, is have more community events such as the Citizens Academy. We made a couple runs at that last couple of years, and we had really limited response from people that wanted to attend. Maybe 4 years ago we did it, and I know Mr. Swift, you came and sat in for one of them.
Yeah,
It
there was
was right here.
pretty good response on those.
Yeah, it was, once we can get people here, it's a great thing because they learn what we do. We can talk, about all the things we do. They all get to go in a police car and do a ride along, which again can change how you view what your public servants do. We now have a foundation. We just need to do some stuff to fund it. So I'm working on that. Again, it's just, no excuses. We just have to figure out a way to make some money and use it for things we need it for equipment. And what I'd really like to use it for is more community engagement stuff. So that's something since we last met and talked about this, I put together a foundation. I have one. I just need to fund it. And that again is on me. Hit it. So Dan, I may defer to you, Mr. Reardon, how much you want me to talk about our committee or what, but I've got about 4 or 5 slides. And Jim too, I'm sorry, how much you want me to talk about the ad hoc committee, but something we all put together. We all came together to figure out, to examine the police department's funding, how we allocate the resources we have, and how those allocations compare to other agencies.
This is like the next agenda item, so it seemed like maybe the public had questions. Do you have anything else before we go to the ad hoc?
Well, I want to mention a couple things. Can you zip through those slides really fast? Okay, nope, all right. Whoop, go back, right there. Okay, so we looked at, I think, 20 or 25 cities in California, all with populations less than 5,000 people. Some things I wanted to point out, and I don't know if it's in the other presentation, is that it's reality. We just have the smallest budget. So it's not a matter of us overspending. I have no fat to cut. We have the smallest budget of all the cities in the county or the state that have populations as small as ours. No grievance, just a fact. Hit it. And again, going to that, of all those agencies in the state that have less than 5,000 people, we spend the least on each citizen. And every city is different. Every city has different incomes. So it's not apples all the way down. We have some oranges, some pomegranates in there. Every city is different. I like pomegranates. Sorry. We spend the least in our city per citizen compared to anywhere else in the state for municipalities that have police officers, that have a police department. Hit it. Our budget versus the general fund, we're 33.94% of the general fund. So we're middle to low in terms of how much we spend. Hit it. In our crime rate, we talked about that. We're at the lower end of the crime rate, adjusted for population. Hit it. Okay. Then I'm done. I will have spoken less than the fire chief, taking out the time you guys ask me questions. What I feel like we need to do, again, this is me. You're the leaders of the community. Tom's the city manager. This is my take on it. I want to retain the folks we have. I know you've heard this from me, but you're going to hear it again. I'd rather have no bodies than a bad body. So we're really specific about who we hire, because when you hire the right people, they don't get you sued. They don't do bad things on duty. We have good humans, and that's always my first litmus test. Is it a good human? Are they a good human? So I want to retain who we have. Again, this is me beating that drum when it works out. We need support staff. It's not, it's not a nice to have, it's a need to have. I understand dollars, but that's one of my priorities. Revenue generation, we talked about that on many fronts in terms of how we might be able to do that. That's important to us. I want to maintain our levels of service. And to do that, I'm listening with 2 big open ears with what you've all said. And I'm going to take that to the bank, and I'm going to factor that into how I lead this police department. But I want to maintain, and if we can, improve our level of service, increase our volunteer staff. People like Mark over here do so much for us in terms of taking reports to court, getting things they drive to Department of Justice and drop off evidence for us. They file our reports, kind of releasing a little bit of the pressure off of Sergeant Brewer and myself. So I'd like to increase that staff. And in the past, we had a cadet program. I think when I started, Sergeant Brewer actually started the program. At some point, I think we had maybe 6, Matt? 8. But gosh darn it, those kids grew up and became adults, and now they can't be cadets anymore. So we need to get, I'd like to have that program. It keeps people local. So that's what I would like to do. Again, following your lead, whatever your lead is, that's what we'll do. Hit it. What works well? Arresting old ladies. So I won't go through all that, but your officers really care about this community. Each one of them could go somewhere else and make a whole lot more money, but how they interact with the community is important to them. It's important to me. That's what works well here. They all do a lot for us, and we have strong relationships with the other agencies that count on us, and we count on them. It's reciprocal on that end. And I think one more. hit it. Those are two of our volunteers. You see Mark right there. And then the other one looks a lot like Jim McEwen because that's his son, Jaden. So I'm done. And I thank you for your attention. More importantly, I thank you for your feedback. And I take it all in.
We thank you for your service. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Before we go on, I'd like to take this opportunity to commend you, your officers. I know that
Thank
you're
you.
the first to give your officers all the credit, but it does start at the top. More than one of your officers have told me how much they appreciate you as a chief. And
Thank you.
also, thank you to our volunteers and our reserves, and hope that your officers and volunteers that are here will relay that appreciation to those that aren't here.
I will do
Okay.
that. Thank you. Cool.
Thanks, Jim. Well
Thank
said.
you.
Hold up, hold up. I think we had a couple questions from the public for you.
If you say so. Oh, hang on. Sir, the Sarge has a better answer. He's the smartest guy in the police department, so.
However, statistics on the percentage of how it's dispositioned. We've only dispositioned it as citation.
Or arrest.
There are occasions where both a driver and a passenger will be issued a citation, say for a seatbelt violation, open container violation. There are also times where we are technically making a traffic stop, but for statistical purposes, it's not coded as a traffic stop. If somebody calls 911 because they see someone driving erratically, that's going to be put in for us as a be on the lookout, not as a traffic stop. So there are different things that will skew those.
Pardon me? It's certainly possible. Yeah. I mean, we only have so many ways we can pull the data, but, and I appreciate that. Yep. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jim.
Mayor,
Thank you for everything.
I spoke a whole lot less than Dominic. Remember that.
Thank you for that too.
We're going to put you back on the spot when we get to the next item.
Okay, we're gonna go right into our report from the ad hoc committee. Dan, are you gonna?
So sure, I'll lead off on this. And so about 6 months ago, we formed a little committee to ask some questions about the financial viability of the police department to make sure that we understood how our financial performance was compared to other cities throughout the state of California, because we figured that was a pretty important place to start to determine, how effective is our police department being. And so Jim Swift and myself and Jim O'Connell and Tom are the main participants in that. And Jim shared some of that information that you saw earlier that was really beautiful in terms of the comparative analysis indicating that the work that's going on in Sutter Creek from a financial perspective is as good as any across the state. And so I'm sorry your fellas have left now, Jim, because I wanted them to hear. Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. But, so that was the initial part, what's the money like? It wasn't about service and this and that. It was the money. So from virtually every angle, we were very impressed with how Sutter Creek stacks up against these other 25 or 30 small cities across the state. And I wanted to thank Jim for the work that you did and everybody else, Jim and Tom, on this deal, because it was pretty painstaking to go do this kind of study, but we figured, hey, let's react to real data. Do we have a problem or don't we? And if we don't have a problem, let's not try to solve something that, we could be spending our time doing something else. So honestly, from that perspective, it was determined by the ad hoc committee that from a dollar and cents perspective and productivity and that type of thing, there is no financial problem that way. The problem we're left with is the revenue side, which says, as the police officers who deserve and earn, more money every year, as that's going to continue to go like this, and the revenue is likely not to keep up with that, we're going to have a problem. So we kind of turned our attention to the revenue side of things in terms of exploring potential revenue opportunities. And right now, let's see, Jim, I'm not sure that we had any good solutions for that at this point. You talked about the foundation and getting that up and running, and good for you for doing that. Other cities have, passed separate tax measures and that type of thing to help support the police. We obviously just passed the Measure P situation, which, as we advertised that and spoke to the community about it, public safety was a big part of that also. It wasn't just roads. So roads was the primary and the immediate focus, and we've all agreed to that, and we're going to stay on that trail. However, we do understand that once we get that, those roads going a little bit better than today, we need to be able to look at some of that revenue to help the department get the support that it needs financially to continue to provide these kinds of services. So that was an area, the revenue. The third part was the notion about, and Claire, you bring this up a lot and I appreciate it, exploring potential partnerships with other cities, other agencies for bigger bang for the buck kind of things. So we're just now interviewing folks from Marin. We started this just a couple of weeks ago. There's a unique JPA was formed down there between Corte Madera, Larkspur, and San Anselmo. And we've interviewed, I don't know, a dozen people down there to learn about what that was about and how that's working for them. We're still early in that process, and we're early in the process of talking to our local partners as well in terms of opportunities there. So we're not in a position to really talk a whole bunch about that because we haven't reached out and done any formal kind of discussions with those folks yet. But the purpose of tonight's kind of update was to say, okay, so X months ago, we decided, let's go figure out what's going on financially. We did that. That's good news. We still have a revenue shortfall over the years, and we all see that. So that's an opportunity. We need to somehow think about how can we get more money. And thirdly, there are other opportunities to be examining in terms of partnerships, whether it's with other agencies or just certain parts of the job, that maybe if we all shared the cost, it would help decrease those costs. And Jim, please.
Don't forget economic development, just to fund our general fund, which would help, which, the general fund funds the police department. It's not just targeted funds for the police department, but our overall fiscal health needs to be improved.
Jim, that's a great point. And that goes to, I mean, it's kind of salient because we're always looking for economic development. And part of that, maybe, a housing situation or something like that. And we don't know yet. There's a couple of housing things on the horizon, and that hasn't even come before the planning commission yet. And, we're not sure what that looks like, but somehow we got to find ways to raise more money around here. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. We're not going to be able to continue offering these increases every year. And
rather than, in my mind, rather than say adding another tax onto what our taxes, we need to raise that,
Existing revenue.
yeah,
Yeah,
generate more sales, which will generate more sales.
exactly.
Not a higher sales tax, just,
No,
just more, collect more sales tax.
right. No, we just, I think last year when we passed, we got the Measure P passed, I think that was terrific. And there's going to be some revenue there, but like we said, initially, that's really focused on road improvement and that type of thing. We've all agreed on that. So what else? Tom, you want to add something?
I think you guys covered it really well. Again, because I don't think there's any real fat on the expense side. Even like looking at partnerships, it's not obvious if it's going to save us money or cost us money. Like
Right.
Jim talked about a part-time administrative position. If we partnered with another department, we would start to pay them for that, which would cost more than our current budget. So there are other areas that we've talked about in the past, things like animal control and dispatch that I think we can continue to look at. That's not people, it's, it is people for dispatch, but.
Right.
But I think, again, looking really at potential revenue, and I think, again, some economic development that would grow the pie is going to be really key just in general. But we do have some ideas that are just really premature right now to share. I think the main focus tonight was to bring the council members that haven't been part of the discussion kind of up to speed to where we are today. So.
And Jim, to you, did you want to add anything to this part of the discussion at this point?
Always come down to, you don't have so much about this partnership. You don't want to get the place you're gonna take the prom date until you sure you got a prom date.
Yeah.
Working on making sure people want to be our partner, if it's feasible, it might be more money. Our examination of the JPA initially might save money, probably a little bit of, it's not much amount. But it's something worth the.
Right.
Partnerships, this point of what we're doing is probably the most fruitful option.
One of the things we've learned early on, looking at the JPA down in Marin, is one of the reasons it was so successful financially is because the administrative overhead for each of those individual departments was so great to begin with, right? But when you look at our overhead, it's so minimal in comparison. It's like even if you got rid of all of that, like Tom said, but then you'd have to start paying somebody else to do the clerk work and the this and all that stuff. So it's not simple. There's no obvious answer, but I think we've covered a lot of ground in the first few months we've been doing it. We're committed to continue the conversation to try to solve the problem long term, because that's when it really becomes a problem, is 5 years from now. When you
I
look
guess
at.
the other thing we did is, hopefully you guys saw the different sheets. Our summer
Yeah.
intern helped pull some of those together, but we started off with that big comparison against all the cities under 5,000, and then we did more detailed analysis on a set of cities we felt were closer to us. And those were the one sheet attachments that were sent out. So if you guys look at those, you can see, and even some of those cities, some of them jumped on like the cannabis tax really early, and they used that for their police department.
Yeah, right.
But those revenues are drying up. So even talking to them, it's helped them, but maybe not in the long term. And then some of the other smaller departments, they also had maybe something different than us, an airport or something else that generated some revenue in different ways. So,
Is there a way to isolate comparing cities with similar economic structures, limited as they are, like we are?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Those
Okay,
attached
Parkland's
reports.
really,
Yeah,
know,
no,
but-
but I don't consider Carmel or really even.
No,
well,
I'm
no-
talking
no,
about,
Nevada City.
Nevada City, very.
Yeah, I was looking at the other chart and
Wheatland.
graphs.
leave it up at the camera
Yeah.
sometimes. Doesn't have to.
Right. So we've got, Weed, Mount Shasta, Nevada City,
Yeah.
So
We-
those are
Bishop,
economic
Angel
Wheatland,
Camp,
yeah,
income.
Plymouth.
Mount Shasta.
Jackson, Lakeport, Ione. those were kind of the group of,
Right, so.
that seemed pretty similar. And in each of those instances, once again, financially, our performance was very good. The other thing that, is no small deal is from a total crime rate perspective. Sutter Creek was, so that's on, you guys, that's on your.
This is the violent crime and property crime.
Is that, yeah, violent crime and property crime.
This is
on page
Sutter
58.
Creek,
Yeah.
the fifth bar over.
One, two,
Jim,
three.
I do have a question for you. When it says, total crime rate 18.46%, is that per thousand? What
Yes,
per thousand annual,
Res-
an annual number per
residents,
thousand?
yeah.
Okay. I thought that's what it was.
I know,
Wanted
isn't
to
that
make
weird?
sure.
Just
That's. Thank you guys for all of your work, and thank you, Chief, for your work. And I know I've been sounding off about this a lot for years now. But it's not that I don't think that our police department is perfectly fine people doing a great job. And you just said yourself, and I've heard you say it before, you are what you can afford, and go with that, and I appreciate that. It's just the economies of scale that I wanted to look at. And, with small cities, the fixed costs just don't scale down that easily. And that's why, it would seem you guys are doing the work, and I appreciate that. But collaborating, or working together with people just mathematically, should help solve that equation. But I appreciate everything you did. Certainly, there is no fat. You have the trimmest budget in the world. Unfortunately, our officers are working for under market, and even what we have going right now won't be feasible in 5 years. So I appreciate that you guys all recognize that. I had a couple kind of nuts and bolts questions with what you guys came up with while we're here, if you don't mind. And beyond the nuts and bolts, one of my questions kind of through this process, and I'm afraid maybe I wasn't explaining it well enough, is one of my concerns is the liability to the city with the police force. And I think we need to include that in our considerations. And I'm not talking about the insurance costs. Mason kind of dabbled in that for us, but the liability of, I did a little digging around. A civil rights lawsuit, use of force lawsuit, could be half of our general fund in a year. And then your insurance goes up for years, and pension liability, employee liability. I do think that needs to be considered when we look at the costs and, determine what we're going to do. I'm not sure how partnership manages that, or if it does. It's just one of my questions that I have in this whole issue. And of course, the thing that
Can I,
helps manage that is, the training that you were talking about.
can I ask a question with regard to that? So if there were to be some sort of lawsuit, does our insurance protect us from financial liability?
Somewhat.
Yes, I'm not sure.
Yes, generally.
But then, like I said, our rates would go up for a while.
A lot. But I just want that to be considered, one of the factors when you guys are exploring this, and the different options.
in terms of whether or not that liability could be mitigated somewhat by any of these potential partnerships.
Or, one of the things we brought up a long time ago, I know we can't go with the sheriff's department without a decreased level of service, but the liability would be gone. Another thing that I still don't think we have is an actual idea of what it would cost to do that. Should we not come up with a better option? Should nothing else work and 5 years down the road, we can't do this? We need to have that information. And as far as I can tell, it's all been kind of conjecture and hypotheticals, and we haven't had an actual conversation with the sheriff's department.
Jim, have you got some information about Sheriff's
I've
Department?
had
I know you have, Jim, and
informal conversations with the sheriff, and to do policing at the level of service that we currently have would be more expensive.
Sure, that's not what I'm talking about, though.
Okay, well, then you have to get into the question of what level of service are you willing, what decreased level of service are you willing to tolerate?
Well,
That's
because
a
if we
complete,
don't
that's a
find-
different question.
we don't find another solution, or revenue, or
Yep.
develop our economy, that may be something we have to determine.
That's true.
I suggest you're never going to avoid liability. It's built into the cost. If you go to the county, it's part of their cost.
I was
You're
going to
just
say
gonna
that
pay
too,
for it.
Claire. You don't,
So reject that, you've let me know and others that we would expect to pay twice as much as Plymouth, and that makes zero sense because we don't have twice the crime rate as Plymouth. It wouldn't take them twice as many hours or twice as many people to manage Sutter Creek as Plymouth. We don't actually
Yeah.
have that data.
No,
I-
I think what I shared was the indications I got was the Plymouth price is a starter price. It's going up.
Uh-huh.
Right, and it's listed out in here. But there's other considerations when you get there too. If we were to do something like that, then the city could possibly have its own community service officer. We're not at that point in the road, but we already underpay the folks we have. We have a sergeant doing, administrative work. We need more. So I
Right.
agree. I'd rather solve that by economic development or, finding some revenue, but
Right.
we do have to face all of these things with all of our departments, with the whole city. This is
Right.
just the ad hoc under review right now.
yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate what you're saying. And in fact, I don't disagree necessarily. I think at this point, it's like, here's the information today. So if the council decides, well, one of the next steps based on what you've brought back, committee, now, I want you to go to the county and I want you to ask this and this and this, what is it you want? Because we're willing to do that. So, but I don't want to guess. Do you want me to go say, well, what could you give us for 600,000 a year? Do you want me to say, what would it take to replace what we have today? I need a little guidance if we're going to have a conversation with the
I
county.
think you guys are working on a couple other ideas. You're talking to people right now, and you don't want to bail on your prom date. I appreciate that. But I think we have to keep our minds open to everything to solve all of the problems in the city.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, not just this one. And again, I think liability is a factor that we need to keep in our minds, as we make these choices. Just on the report, I had a couple, I don't even know if they're questions, just observations. So, Chief, how many people does it take to have 2 per shift?
So right now, we're functioning with 4 full-time police officers. and
Mhm.
myself.
Okay.
So we're authorized 5. So minimally, we have a wait when we have 5, I have an overlap. So this new person we're gonna have, is gonna have an overlap. So we're gonna reduce time people are alone by like a quarter.
Sure.
One person is, when you have such small numbers, doesn't matter where you are, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it makes a big difference for you folks, for your officer, and then in what we're able to do here. Looking at, say, Nevada City, they have 10, and you did the financial comparisons. That's probably 2 per shift, right? So the functionality in there, I think it kind of becomes a little apples and oranges-y because I believe it was Nevada City. Some of these, the police department somewhat paid for with parking revenues. They could do that because they have more police. I see that these factors are going back and forth. There were another couple cities that it looked like the per person was similar to ours, and they probably had, here you go, Wheatland has 8, which is likely 2 per shift-ish, 2 per most shifts. And their cost per resident was $391. So, as we're narrowing in on those things, I would just consider when you look at the staffing of these cities, that becomes an apples and oranges thing, because what we can do with 1 person per shift versus what you can do with 2 changes the level of service.
And I think both those cities, it's interesting to look at their revenue, right? So Nevada had a 0.5 cent sales tax, and they passed a special measure that was dedicated to their police. And then Wheatland, they did have some marijuana money. And I think they also had a sales tax, 0.5 cent sales tax that went to police.
They have but it's not, their expenditures in general fund aren't that far off.
Right,
And
that's why
half
we
the-
picked these
yeah.
cities as examples. And the difference was on the revenue side. It seemed like they really let them do more. And I think you're right. I mean, you need to get to about 10 to have two officers on duty.
With regard to the liability, Derek, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know, and I might be totally wrong, but I don't know that contracting with the sheriff would remove our liability, because we would be paying the sheriff, and it seems to me an attorney would loop in the city of Sutter Creek were there to be a lawsuit.
No, the sheriff would ultimately be responsible, but the sheriff would require that we pay the premiums. And that might be something that's covered in the contract.
So it wouldn't necessarily like,
I don't think it helps. I mean, I think the liability is baked in whether we provide it or we contract for it
okay.
to what we ultimately pay.
And then what I would be interested in hearing, and not because I don't love having a full-time police force, and I think it's amazing and it's so wonderful to live in such a safe place with such devoted officers, but I would be interested to hear after, and thank you for all the work on this and the specifics and detail, but I would be interested in seeing if Jim and the sheriff were to have a conversation and to see what level of service from the sheriff's department they felt we needed to be as safe as we are today, and what that level of enforcement would look like and what that would cost.
I'm not sure how the sheriff would would know what level of service we need to maintain the crime rate at what it is now. I mean, that,
Well, I mean, I don't think it would be like, okay, this is like, here's the data and we know for sure, but say this is how safe it is now. These are where we, like on a day-to-day basis, how many calls that need to be responded to or emergency, or like, how can we make, it would be
Ask
a
him to do
bit philosophical.
some kind of an evaluation, though,
Yeah.
is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, between
Could the
data
sheriff do?
and
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So
experience, I would hope.
and I was curious, I don't know if this is going down the same path as you, Susan, but a hybrid of being able to maintain, a certain level of our own police staff, maybe for X number of hours, 18 out of 24 hours. And for 6 hours or maybe certain days, be able to say, okay, on those days, we're going to have our sheriff department. So I don't know if that's even an option, a viable option. But I'm just going to throw that out there, some type of hybrid model maybe.
To that, yeah, it's a good question. And I think to that point, we went at it this way, and tell me if this makes sense. We did an analysis to determine when it's more active and less active in terms of calls and stuff. Yeah. And there was no discernible variance, which made the notion of being able to carve something out and say, well, we'll have the sheriff do the downtime or whatever, made that even more kind of,
So did you look at that at just hourly or on a daily?
hourly and daily.
Oh, okay, wow. That's interesting. Yeah.
That's a fantastic idea, but understand everything's transactional. So I don't, I can speak to the sheriff, but you're not likely to do it for nothing.
Oh, no.
We were to say, hey, you're gonna do it for radars on Tuesdays when it's, their, deputy costs are higher than ours. So I don't know, might save money, probably wouldn't, but there's always that cost, that adds on.
Makes sense. Thank you. Yeah.
Part of this committee, we're looking there.
Yeah.
No bad.
The other question I had is looking at just comparing, because it kind of stood out, Ione and Sutter Creek.
Yeah.
On the police cost percentage of general fund, Sutter Creek is 37.5. Ione is 56% of their general budget. But when you look at the cost per resident, Sutter Creek is not that much lower. So they pay, Ione residents pay $405 per resident. Sutter Creek pays $391, $392.
Fewer people to divide into the amount of money.
Is the based on population
Yes,
size?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just it's the denominator that
That would make sense.
drives the answer.
Right.
So
Yeah.
to make more clear what I was trying to say that I'd be interested in finding is maybe looking at Pine Grove and Plymouth would be applicable because they are, I don't know that I don't know their crime rates offhand, but it seems to me that they're relatively similar to ours and how the sheriff ensures that level of safety and what that would cost us. That's
Right.
the number I would be interested in finding.
Yeah.
No, I know, but I mean, to talk to the sheriff and say, hey, we want what Plymouth has, what would it cost?
Yeah, fair enough. I hear what you're saying. I appreciate that clarity. Thank you. There was another data point. I thought it was kind of important, and I can't quantify it exactly, but anecdotally, we heard, and I think Claire, you're hip to this. I think you've said it. We heard from a lot of people, be careful, because if you make a move like this, you can't go back in terms of shutting down your police department. I mean, we talked to people who had done it, and things looked pretty good for a while, and then they didn't, and then trying to get back seemed like an impossibility. So the risk factor kind of went up in my mind that I wasn't quite as aware of before. Just listening to some, yeah. So just a data,
It does seem, as I've poked around, that a lot of smaller cities in California and Oregon and Washington merged more than abandoning something, it seems. And when we look at everything else we do, except ARSA, it seems like working together, regionalizing, sharing things. We were talking about sharing cameras, sharing an administrator, sharing a chief if ours one day retires, things like that.
right.
Just logically, you guys are doing the work.
Exactly. No, I hear you.
You just look at the math. It seems like it would help.
No, and I think down in Marin, the other thing we learned early on was that one of the reasons back in 1980, when they first formed this JPA, one of the reasons it kind of cascaded and got done was because one of the chiefs was getting ready to retire. So there was no friction in terms of, well, who's going to run the show and all that kind of stuff. So that helped move things along, just FYI.
And I also, I don't know if you guys talk to folks in these cities, or I think may have collected a lot of the data. But when I was asking the chief about the training modules and then talking to Brewer about cameras, is there some sort of, the League of California Cities has a small cities bureau or something, you could call one guy down in Sacramento and ask him your small city questions. Do cops have that? Do you guys have a little small cities club where you can get together and solve these questions?
Police officers for a long time, have a pretty strong network. People in big cities and those, I call them all the time.
It's apples and oranges, but small cities in California especially, we're all facing the costs like this and the revenue like this. Not just with our police, but with our infrastructure, with our staffing, with our every single thing, so. Mhm.
So it's an association with all the chiefs are in, talk back and forth. I know most of the chiefs have passed small cities, like ours, and the big ones too. So my problems, our problems, having a small police department are unique. But they're unique. Not other agencies are doing the same thing. Look at some of the statistics there. You can kind of narrow it down, and funnel it down to agencies, municipalities that have the same general fund, the same income, and police departments that generally have the same range of budgets, and ours smaller. But when we talk with those folks, I've talked with those folks about how we have low fat. I'll continue to look for ways to carve off
Oh,
a little bit.
I know you have no fat. And,
The city doesn't have. it either.
I've felt that way for a while and, this exercise has shown it even more. And, I appreciate that, that we're just doing our due diligence and our job, in doing this. But, I expect that there's 20 people in a couple other rooms around California, scratching their head about the same problems right about now. So.
I did
So
have one
it's-
question on that total crime rate thing, Jim, that Julia was just drawing my attention to also. That just seems odd, right? Like, so it's violent crime rate and property crime rate. And so Sutter Creek coming in at, like double Ione in those numbers. It seemed weird. Does that ring a bell, like in terms of, does it pass the logical test? Maybe there's something funny with
I
that.
think it depends if they included the prison population in the per
Or not.
capita number.
Oh, interesting.
Could be.
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah,
So I just want to,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a curiosity.
so I think it's been a really good discussion. I think it is getting a little late. We should probably
Move on.
move it along. I
Thank
think we
you.
got some good feedback though.
Think from us, Dan, Jim?
I think, let me just in 60 seconds say, I think what I hear you asking for is to particularly have a conversation, not only the ones that we're having, but go to the county with more specificity around just asking simple questions like, well, if you gave us what Plymouth has, whatever the heck that is, what would that cost? And, get some, frame a reference. That's a great way.
For
Is that-
to be diligent, and I do think though that we would need to, we need to consider the oversight that we would be giving up. in
Totally.
that decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
Big trade-offs. What about when you have a parade?
Right.
What about other
Exactly.
special events?
Right.
Okay.
But they don't have-
Right. No, Jim, you're absolutely right. Okay.
Yeah, but it is a question, Claire, that you have to address.
And that,
You have to get answered. Yeah.
and some of those questions may actually lead, I would like to see, again, just an accurate comparison of a couple hybrid options. Just personally, just to.
Okay.
Did you
Oh.
finish your 60-second wrap up?
Sure.
Okay. Moving on then to the city tree planting update. Dan?
So if you see my super amazing picture there.
So Dan, you say,
I saved some money on the drafting costs of that, let's just say.
you say those are trees, huh?
That's an AI tree.
It's more of a conversation bubble in a line, so that was looked the closest, so.
That was like a pineapple tree.
Yeah, so
Not much.
the main point of this report was just to show that we're gonna put the rest of the trees in to make that line straight again.
Good.
I tried to look for tree spots downtown. I was thinking about taking some red spaces out and making like planter boxes there. The utility problem through downtown is just everywhere. So there was almost nowhere that I could find that didn't have some utility running through
You-
it.
You got
So that was my
power.
intent with the report, but then it just never,
Mhm.
never materialized. So.
I think this is a great start.
Yeah,
Start
absolutely.
planning
Thank you.
resources
Yay.
too, and We'll keep.
Are there any
continuing to
plans
Keep thinking.
for expanding any, or more trees down in Miners Bend?
Miners Bend is really your next of.
Same thing with utilities. I didn't look into it as much. I can look into that more.
That Miners Bend dam thing, you know, there's that faucet there. I know you don't like this idea, but I'm seeing more and more of it where people are using the water. They're not burying the pipes. They're just using heavy duty stuff and they're covering it up against a curb and running it down
Oh,
and not burying it.
oh, not bearing the pipe.
Right. And
Yeah.
but it could be, you know, safely done, I think.
Mhm.
So think about that when you're down there.
Okay. Yeah.
It would be a really inexpensive way to do some planter boxes down
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
And then.
Just so you,
There.
just so you know, those islands that have the river rock in it up at Miners Bend.
Right.
Okay, under the river rock is blacktop.
I know.
They blacktopped the whole thing.
Right.
Then they did the curb and then they just
Exactly.
made a bathtub with
Oh,
the
so you
curb
can't get
and then
into the-
fill it with rock. So you've got to,
Really
Excellent.
clear out everything.
you got to move the rock and
Unless you do huge planter boxes.
Yeah, I think long-term though, it would make more sense to actually get rid of the asphalt because trees like to go.
Unless we can never afford to do that. And then we
Well,
never have
like-
anything.
So it's the
gravel parking lot.
Someone suggested a
ones that are done.
tree foundation that Tom Village is interested in being a part of, so I'm working on that.
Good.
Anyway, it looks good,
Pursue
Dan.
that.
Thank you.
Need anything else from us, Dan?
No.
Nope. Okay, we're skipping D till next time. Future agenda items. I dare ya.
I,
Mayor and Kelp.
I would like to do one. There is a potential in meeting with the Bike Ped Committee today on some grants for some safe routes through town, including sidewalks. And so we're going to be exploring, I'm meeting with ACTC Director John Gedney on Wednesday morning. There's a 3-grant process that's reasonable to pursue. So I would like to hopefully have an update by the beginning of December on that.
It's amazing. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, mayor and council member reports,
Nothing here.
city attorney's report. Okay, we are going to dismiss you all and go into a closed session after a short recess.
Thank you.
Okay.
Claire.